Given the constant load shedding, failing power stations and corruption at the embattled power utility Eskom, when can we expect to find ourselves in the dark ages, out of the dark ages, that is, out of the dark ages for good? Now, keep in mind that the fact that a fire broke out at a power station in Mpumalanga just this past weekend. The economy has suffered a crippling blow when we ran out of electricity in 2007, and it has happened over and over again. Load shedding has become part of our reality. Some experts believe that nuclear power may be the only solution to long-term sustainable electricity. Energy consultant Andrew Kenny and South African Independent Power Producers Association Chairperson Thomas Garner join me now to share their views. Thank you so much, Mr. Kenny. Let me start with you. There was this Section 34 determination by Minister Gwede Mantashe, and it served before the board at the National Energy Regulator of South Africa. And then there was communication, excitement on the side of the department that the regulator had, quote-unquote, concurred with this determination for procurement of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear energy. But it seems it's not so clear where things stand at the moment. Just your understanding, are we or are we not getting 2,500 megawatts of nuclear energy?
Well, my understanding is we've been given the go-ahead. We're now going out for requests for proposals. In other words, we're going out for tender. The tenders, we should go out by the end of this fiscal year, the end of this year, go out for tender. We should get them in by the end of next year. And by about 2024, if everything's accepted, if the government accepts if we accepts the tender, and we go out, then we would start contracting about 2024. And in that case, the first units would come online by about 2031, 2032, something like that, if there are full approvals all the way, which I hope there are.
Sure. And Mr. Garner, is that your understanding as well? I saw that NERSA came out after a bit of that debate on whether or not they had concurred, came out and published their suspensive conditions that they say must be met. They concur with the commencement of the process to procure this nuclear energy, but there are a few conditions that they've put. Is that your understanding that this is the green light that the Energy Department needed?
Yeah, I think it's not completely clear. I agree with Andrew on those timelines, subject to that that it's actually built in time. We've seen, for instance, Mpumalanga and Kusile being built. It should have come online in 2012. It started building in 2008. It's now 2021. Not yet completed for those power stations. So there's normally a lot of challenges in the build. So to answer your question is I think there are a few suspensive conditions from the NERSA side, and it's not clear exactly what this will lead to. The challenge is that if it's not clear, it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty, you can't go out on an RFP or invest in an environment of uncertainty.
Let me stick with you for a moment, Mr. Garner. So you take the words right out of my mouth that no one can blame South Africans for being skeptical when we talk about a build program of any significance, given our experience with Medupi and Kusile. The timelines that Mr. Kenny points out to are quite optimistic in my view, coming on stream online by 2031, 2032. Do you share that optimism, given our experience?
I'm the eternal optimist myself, but in this case, I'm not optimistic about the timelines. And the reason is simply because we've seen how wrong it can go with Medupi and Kusile. It's unfortunate that, and that's my challenge with this RFP process, or let's say the nuclear process. I've got nothing against the technology. I've got everything against the process of the ruling party trying to access the funds. as they've done with Medupi and Kusile through Chancellor House and Hitachi Africa. So it seems that the ruling party has run out of money, and this will be the only way for them to double dip again. So I think it's a challenging process from a corruption point of view, and making sure we get the megawatts on the bars. Let's say anything between 2031 and 2035. I'm not sure that that's going to happen.
Mr. Kenny, what are we looking at here? We already have one nuclear power station, Koeberg, at 1,800 megawatts being, what my understanding is. Are we looking at another power station, one power station, or is this modular and basically spread out in various parts of the country? What exactly are we looking at in terms of this procurement?
I think that there's two possibilities. We go with big conventional power stations such as Medupi, such as Koeberg, or we go in for small modular reactors. But I think first do the conventional ones, get them going first, and then consider the small modular reactors, which aren't yet operating commercially anywhere in the world. What we want to do is to go for reactors that are successful, operating successfully elsewhere in the world, built by builders who've got a successful construction record. Those two things are essential for our procurement. Just if I can comment on what Mr. Garner is saying, I agree with him completely. There's no technical reasons against nuclear. It's entirely political and to do with the government. And as you say, Medupi and Kusile have been a disaster. Bad designs, corruption, both far too late and way over budget. Nuclear will, to a certain extent, avoid those problems because we'll choose a proven design, not a new design like Kusile or Medupi, a proven design as is working around the world successfully. Choose one of those designs, an approved vendor, construction vendor with a record of building on time. Choose one of those. And if we do that, that will greatly alleviate those sort of problems.
So if I stick with you again, Mr. Kenny, how does this process avoid the pitfalls that befell the Rosatom Eskom cooperation agreement, which ended up being set aside by the courts, and also avoid the pitfalls like what we've seen with my biggest disappointment, of course, is with Medupi, for example, because, I just feel like this is a power station that's less than 5 years, built at hundreds of millions of rand, and it's misfiring within the first 5 years. How do we then navigate this expertly such that we avoid the pitfalls of Eskom Rosatom debacle, but also the pitfalls of Medupi and Kusile?
Okay, let me deal with Medupi and Kusile first. To repeat, we should have built power stations in the 1990s, and we didn't. We ran out of electricity in 2007. Finally, they panicked and started building power stations in the panic, and they chose Kusile and Medupi, they were far too big, bad designs, first off designs, bad contracting, bad workmanship, long delays and everything. And as you rightly say, already we've had an explosion in a generator in Unit 4, I think, of Medupi. So it's been a series of incompetence and corruption and disastrous. As I say, the way to avoid that with nuclear, we chose a proven design already working successfully in the world and a proven vendor with a good record of construction. As for the problems with Rosatom, this was a political procurement problem that they went out for inquiries about what they got to offer. I've forgotten what the term was that for, and that was stopped by the Cape Town court on procedural grounds, that the DME hadn't followed the right procedure here and there and so forth. So it's a matter of procedures. They hadn't followed the right procedures. That was all. Nothing to do with anything fundamentally wrong with going out and inquiring about new nuclear.
Right. Mr. Garner, let me give you the last word on this. One of the suspensive conditions that NERSA has put down in writing has to do with establishing the rationality, and I'm emphasizing here, behind the 2,500 megawatt capacity of nuclear. They are saying that a demand analysis aimed at matching the envisaged load profile post-2030 with the generation profile that would be needed to match that is required. It sounds to me like a complicated way of saying we basically need to ascertain if we will need this much nuclear energy post-2030. It seems to me like just background work. Basically, NERSA is saying, go back and do background work. That would be worrying that if we're already talking about procurement and we've not done this background work.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that specific suspensive condition was set. If you look at electricity planning, you go and look at what the demand will be over time. Now, in the current IRP 2019, I think the demand showed that by around 2016, the demand was around 220 terawatt hours per annum. And by 2050, it would be around 400 terawatt hours per annum. So if you do a simple calculation on 2,500 megawatts of nuclear, my calculation says it's around 18 to 20 terawatt hours per annum. So that means by 2050, you would have to, if you only go nuclear, which is not practical, but if you can do that, simply from a theoretical perspective, you would need to build 22 stations like that. Now, I don't think we've got the capital or the appetite or the sites to build 22 nuclear stations in South Africa by 2050. So the essence of this is that you need an energy mix, and the energy mix is made up of nuclear, gas, wind, solar, all of these other combinations. And I think so a demand profile that you must remember for a nuclear plant is the supply profile is actually very constant. You can't really ramp a nuclear plant down or up. You start it up, you ramp it up, and then you keep it at that a level of supply all the time. And we've got a flexible demand profile, so you need to mix nuclear with other technologies as well to have flexibility.
All right. Mr. Thomas Garner and Andrew Kenny, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on All Angles on eNCA. It's a fascinating discussion. We are back having that conversation, the nuclear option back on the table. I'm back with more news for you at the top of 12.